The duration of the Russia-Ukraine war has officially surpassed that of the Eastern Front in World War II. Inadvertently, the current stage of this conflict was perfectly encapsulated by Donald Trump's own words. When asked about Volodymyr Zelensky's suggestion to capture Putin and make him stand trial, the way they did to Maduro, Trump's response immediately set off the hardline pro-war Telegram channels, and for good reason.
Would you ever order a mission to go and capture Vladimir Putin?
Well, I don't think it's going to be necessary.
After all, when a sitting U.S. president discusses the idea of abducting his Russian counterpart instead of dismissing it completely, it can only be described as hitting rock bottom. The logic follows, therefore, that if tomorrow this relationship goes awry, say, if Putin calls him names, Trump won't hesitate to abduct him. Beyond personal sympathies, Trump sees no fundamental obstacle preventing him from doing so. The fact that Putin is the leader of a nuclear state and a permanent member of the UN Security Council? That is now completely irrelevant. Trump doesn't like the idea only as long as he likes Putin. Once that relationship sours, capturing him becomes a real option. That is reason enough to talk about what our great geostrategist, empire builder, and mighty rearranger of the world has actually accomplished nearly 4 years into this war. Trump blurting this out right before the landmark day, when this war surpassed WWII's Eastern Front duration, was actually a good thing. We've seen an entire era fly by. To understand what it has turned into, we first need to look at how it was before. Let's revisit the pre-war era. At the end of the 2021 fiscal year, the Russian federal budget was executed with a surplus of 500 billion rubles. Total revenues were 25.3 trillion, with expenses at 24.8 trillion. Of those revenues, over 9 trillion rubles, roughly $125 billion at the time, came from oil and gas. To put that in perspective, $125 billion amounted to more than 50% of Ukraine's entire pre-war GDP, and mind you, that was just the oil and gas money, cash mostly paid by Europe, making Russia richer over a single year. In January 2022, you could take an Uber to a Moscow airport, stick your ruble bills in a Russian ATM, pay 3,000 rubles for a direct low-cost flight to Berlin, and buy a cup of coffee at Brandenburg Airport using your Russian bank card. Today, this sounds like a borderline sci-fi movie plot. You would have been called crazy 4 years ago if you told anyone they'd need a connecting flight via Istanbul, have to fly to Kazakhstan to get a bank card that works in Europe, and pose as a Turkish or Argentinian national just to buy a game on the PlayStation Store. It's a shocking contrast. Back then, almost every city had dealerships where you could walk in and buy a Toyota, Audi, BMW, or Hyundai. The cars came with warranties and service. You didn't need to pay bribes disguised as utilization fees or go through middlemen. You just walked in and bought a car. A shadow tanker fleet would have been an unimaginable story before the war. To think Russia would be selling crude oil like a drug cartel, bypassing sanctions with rusting, bulk purchase tankers? Even before Trump began targeting the shadow fleet, its very existence was an embarrassing reality. How does a major global fossil fuel supplier end up running a shadow fleet? How could they hit such a low? The failed plan. Just as a refresher on how this happened, it started as a full-blown imperial crusade. The idea was that America, China, and Russia, 3 equal superpowers, would divide the world into spheres of influence. To kickstart this, Russia needed to define its sphere. The great geostrategist believed Russia would hold undivided sway over former Soviet republics and the Eastern Bloc. We decide if they join NATO. We pick their presidents. These nations will be de facto colonies. Let the U.S. handle the West. Let China take Southeast Asia, but the territory of the old Russian Empire? That belongs to us. As Trump was sworn in for his second term, this concept seemed to flourish. Trump seems to prefer the idea of might makes right over obscure international laws, but a year into Trump's term, he began wondering, why am I even negotiating with Putin? Rumor has it that as early as his first term, Putin sort of trade-off. I won't back Maduro in Venezuela. You take his oil, you give me Ukraine. But this redivision of the world fails to answer one question. Why would Trump swap anything? What if he just takes everything? What if he decapitates the Venezuelan regime, seizes the tankers, and ignores Putin entirely? What made Putin think he was a player, and not a plaything, in this high-stakes game? 4 years into the war, he is miserably stuck in eastern Ukraine. He is neck-deep in debt. His trade relies on smuggling. His army has failed to deliver. What cards does he have left? Trump's comments about capturing Putin might sound savage, but looking at Putin's scorecard over the last 4 years, you have to ask, why not? He's out of funds. He's decimated his own army. If push comes to shove, Kim Jong-un might be the only one offering sympathy. Putin has landed in a dangerous spot. If Trump decides to rob Putin of his tankers, pull the plug on Russian oil sales, and seize the assets, nobody will mind. Over the past 4 years, Putin has turned into someone who can be handled in any way without global protest. In fact, if something happens to him and the risk of global war drops to zero, Trump would be forgiven for all his past antics. Loss of leverage. When Russia was integral to the global economy and European energy, leaders had to talk to Putin. Back then, he was thought to have a top-tier military. Everyone assumed capturing Kiev was just a matter of choice. People walked on eggshells. Today, Putin has no resources to risk another major campaign. He might want to threaten the Baltic states, but that's it. Soviet stockpiles have been blown up on the battlefield. Oil exports are no longer the budget savior they once were. So, why would anyone consider Putin's view on the world order important? In 2022, Putin set out to show why the world should be redivided with him. And he did show us, but looking at the tragedy and wasted resources, the world has decided, no. He has no aces left up his sleeve. When his ally Bashar al-Assad was being toppled, Putin could offer no aid because his entire military was busy inching toward Pokrovsk. The Putin-led government can barely handle the current burden. They certainly cannot afford a new one. At the start of the war, Putin could threaten to seize Western assets or cut off gas. 4 years later, it's already done. The assets are gone, the gas is cut, the troops are deployed, he has no leverage left. In 2021, Putin could send armed men to Google's office in Moscow to take hostages and demand video removal. He can't do that anymore. Google is gone. Volkswagen, Mercedes, Intel, McDonald's, they don't fear losing assets in Russia anymore. They've already lost them. New sanctions on banks don't worry Visa or MasterCard anymore. They are already gone. Over 4 years, Putin hasn't just killed at least 300,000 Russians and run up huge debts. He has successfully taught the global economy to survive without Russia. Hollywood, European airlines, and tech giants have all figured out how to move on. The most conspicuous outcome isn't just that Trump can threaten to capture Putin. It's that everyone would be hard-pressed to say how Putin could even retaliate. What troops will he send? Where? What can he freeze? What can he seize? Before the war, Russia was a key part of the global mechanism. The past 4 years have been spent helping the world manage without it. Putin has done everything he could to isolate himself. That is why the U.S. president can talk about his Russian counterpart as if he were a wallet left at a bus stop. Maybe he gets it back, maybe he doesn't, but there will be no consequences. Putin started this war to force the world to factor Russia in. 4 years later, thanks to the great geostrategist, there is no reason for anyone to factor Russia in at all. See you tomorrow.